Mr. Speaker, I rise to condemn in the strongest possible terms the ongoing, unrelenting attacks against civilians in Syria committed by the barbaric, lawless regime of Bashar al-Assad with Russian backing. We have all heard the statistics over and over again, like a broken record. As many as 500,000 people killed since the armed conflict began in March 2011, tens of thousands of them civilians. Tens of thousands more detained, disappeared, and perhaps are even likely dead directly at the hands of the regime. More than 11 million people displaced once and again inside and outside of Syria's borders, the largest single refugee crisis in the world has seen since 1945. More than half of those displaced are children and youth. Last summer, much was made of the ceasefire agreement that the Trump administration reached with the Russian government to establish de-escalation zones to stabilize Syria while keeping the Assad regime in power. We were told the agreement would save lives. All of a sudden, you are going to have no bullets being fired in Syria, Trump said. Well, that has turned out not to be true. The de-escalation zones are not de-escalating. As of late December, more than 400,000 people remain trapped, besieged by regime forces in eastern Ghouta, one of the de-escalation zones, only half an hour's drive from Damascus. As Jan Egeland, UN Special Advisor on Syria, said last December, there is no de-escalation zone. There is only escalation in this de-escalation zone. Idlib, another de-escalation area, suffered a dramatic increase in air attacks last September against armed groups not covered by the ceasefire agreement. In late December, airstrikes and shelling against a hospital, a medical warehouse, and a vegetable market killed, injured, and displaced scores of people. The U.S. government heralded the military defeat of ISIS in Syria in November. But the defeat of ISIS has not and will not end the Syrian conflict. And Russia has not succeeded in pressuring Assad to end the conflict, nor in restraining Assad's attacks on civilians as he has gone after rebel forces. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Syria deteriorates each and every day. World Vision estimates that 5.6 million people are in need of acute humanitarian assistance. The UN says a total of 13.1 million needs some form of assistance. That's 3 million more than at the end of 2016. The situation is worse today, after months of de-escalation, than it was a year ago. Of those 13 million, 3 million are trapped in besieged and hard-to-reach areas. That's 4.5 times the population of Boston or Washington, D.C. Humanitarian access to those areas is not guaranteed by the regime nor by its backers. International law obligations be damned. Some of the most heartbreaking news out of Syria has to do with the crisis in health care. The weaponization of health care in Syria is not new, but the depravity of it all still shocks me. According to a recent report by researchers at the American University in Beirut, Syria has become the most dangerous place on earth for health care providers. According to the International Rescue Committee, in 2011, there was 1 doctor per 600 people in Syria. But now in East Ghouta, there is only 1 doctor per 3,600 people. Medical supplies are not allowed into besieged areas, and terribly ill patients are not allowed out. What military or political purpose is served by denying medical evacuation to women and children suffering from heart disease, cancer, kidney failure, and blood diseases? Mr. Speaker, current policy is not working to end the crisis in Syria. It is time to change course, not by sending more special forces troops there without any authorization, nor by promising to keep them there indefinitely to fight against the next iteration of ISIS. What we need is to reassert American diplomatic leadership and exert real pressure to end the war. We need a plan to transition Assad out of power. We need to pass House Resolution 632, condemning the senseless attacks on hospitals and medical personnel in Syria. We need to shame Russia for its failure to ensure humanitarian access. We need to increase our contributions to humanitarian assistance for Syria and make full use of the option of cross-border assistance. We need to open our hearts to the Syrian refugees and welcome more of them to our country. And we need to do everything in our power to lay the groundwork to ensure accountability for Assad's victims. That includes funding the international, impartial, and independent mechanism to assist in the investigation and prosecution of war crimes. The Syrian conflict has gone on far too long. The horror of it all can be mind-numbing, but we must not lose our outrage. Now is the time to re-energize our efforts and find a way to end the suffering. I yield back my time.
Chair recognizes